I'm Michelle from Vitality Reconnected. Each week I share tips and information with you to help you reconnect with your inner vitality. This week is part 7 of our long-term series on women's body image. Today I'm really excited to be presenting an interview with JP Sears. Many of you will know of him and his work, and he's got some fantastic points for all of you to take away. This week I haven't actually cut myself out of it. I think it flows really well to hear the questions that I'm asking JP and then his answers. So let's get straight into it.
My name is JP Sears. I'm 34 years old. I'm a delightfully delusional seeker in life. I do emotional healing work for a living. And the most significant women in my life, I think there's 3 of them, my girlfriend Deanna being one of them, my sister, and my mother, making up the holy trinity of women in my life.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for being with us, JP. Before we go too far into the topic of women's body image, do you have any maybe personal experiences that you've had within your own life with maybe dealing with women around you who have struggled with their body image or their self-love? And if so, how has that directly impacted your life and your relationship with that woman or women?
Yeah, I think it's a challenge, and back up, say, yes, I have had experiences, and I think when I've been in a relationship with a woman who has, at least at times, if not all the time, body image issues, from my perspective, they're in a place of not accepting themselves. And they blame their body for it and make up a story that says, if I had an amazing, picture-perfect body, then I'd be acceptable. So my experience of them is when they're in a place of not accepting themselves, they reject my acceptance of them. It's like deep inside, they don't believe that they're acceptable to me. And to be honest with you, being in my shoes as the man in those relationships, it's very painful. It's very painful to have my love and my acceptance of the lovely woman as she is, having that rejected. And I think a second angle of pain is it's certainly painful to see a loved one or a significant other being in a place of self-torment where they don't accept themselves and have a very negative story wrapped around their physical body, if not their mental or emotional body as well.
Yeah. So when you've experienced these pains with, feeling rejected and that your compliments and viewpoints of any woman hasn't been received, has that affected your relationship with that woman or women in any way?
Yeah, I would say at the very least it's a strain. And at the most it's been a roadblock, sort of a stopping factor. And I think, inside of me, I've got my inner world of insecurities that get triggered, my self-image issues that I don't think mine are necessarily projected onto my body, but trust me, I've got plenty of self-image issues where when my love and acceptance are rejected by my partner, intellectually I might understand, well, they're rejecting my acceptance because they don't feel acceptable the way they are. But at a feeling level, it's like that registers inside of me that says my love and acceptance, they're not good enough. That's why it's being rejected. And that's very challenging inside of me, and that sends me face first into my realm of personal insecurities. So I'm taking things very personal, like my love isn't good enough. I'm not good enough the way I am. So, when I get too far down that rabbit hole, while my partner gets too far down her rabbit hole, that's separation. The relationship becomes more and more disconnected. And I don't know how many, but I've certainly had some relationships end because we each go down our personal rabbit holes of self-image issues. And on the flip side, where there's, a shadow, there's always a light side. So the self-image issues, when those can be talked about, my current relationship, I think we do a pretty darn good job of talking about the self-image issues in a vulnerable way. So instead of them being a force of disconnection, they're a force of connection, where we can bring up, hey, it seems like you're rejecting my acceptance of you. And I'm wondering, is that true for you? And what's that about? And let's talk about that. And here's what comes up for me. So what otherwise has been a force of disconnection, I think it can be a force of connection when we bring our, personal challenges or self-image issues into the light of communication and vulnerability.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really important point, because you can, turn inwards and not share that with your partner, and it can really create that disconnected, even just feeling. So I think it's important to really build that together, and you can help each other with that.
Mm.
Before I get into a little bit more of your professional stance on it, if we could just stay in your personal space for a little bit for this next question. If there is a woman or women that are watching this video that are, maybe struggling with their own body image and how they view themselves, from, one human to another, what message would you want them to take away from watching this video that comes from a male's perspective, not from, say, a female's perspective on this topic?
Well, what comes up for me is natural is most beautiful to me. Unapologetically being you, flaws and all, whether the flaws are there or you just believe they're there, but unapologetically being you, to me, that's most attractive. And I think it's also most life-giving for the individual. And I think a lot of us, it's part of the human condition to feel ugly. I think it's just going to happen. But letting what we judge to be our ugliness, letting that shine, ironically, I think that's beautiful.
I love it. I love it. While we're on that personal aspect, JP, you mentioned that you've had your own inner struggles with accepting who you are. Would you like to share some of those stories today?
No, but I will. Part of me, of course, wants to cover those up and pretend they're not true. Yeah, there's a part of me inside that almost, it lives with the mantra that says, if you knew who I really was, you could never love me. And there's other parts of me on the job, but that part of me, yeah, it's there. So, some of my inner struggles revolve around the theme of acceptance as well. I'm not good enough to be accepted just the way I am. So I typically do a lot of people pleasing, charming people, getting people to laugh. When I can do that, that that allows this really deeply insecure, wounded part of me to temporarily believe now I'm acceptable. And of course, that becomes a very unsustainable drug addiction because I'm acceptable for just a little while. Now I've got to get people to laugh again and charm them again and a little more than last time. And the thrill of feeling accepted because everybody's laughing, that lasts for shorter and shorter lengths of time because what creeps in and displaces it is worry about the next time. I've got to get people to laugh the next time, and how am I going to do that? So it's been really challenging for me to look at what's in my heart underneath that kind of dysfunction where maybe I'm not out seeking the perfect body. In a way, I'm seeking the perfect personality body of being the charming people pleaser, funny guy. So underneath that, those behaviors, I think, is a part of me that's in a lot of pain, feels essentially the shame of I'm not good enough the way I am. And I'm definitely still on a journey of accepting that part of me, letting this part of me just be a part of me. This part of me's truth in any given moment just might be, I'm not good enough the way I am. And letting that just be and accepting it rather than trying to cover it up with piles and piles and piles of people pleasing. It's somehow liberating, it's freeing, but it's also scary to not cover it up, to unapologetically show up within myself and with other people who I feel safe enough around to say, yep, this part of me doesn't feel good enough the way he is. This part of me doesn't feel acceptable, doesn't feel worthy of your acceptance unless he earns it. Being able to call that out rather than act out symptoms of it. Again, it's scary, but at the same time liberating. The last thing I'll add to that is my life experiences, the more I try and cover it up and, act out the perfect image, or at least try and pursue the perfect image, I bind myself in a tighter and tighter self-imposed prison the more I don't let myself be who I am. And as it relates to body image issues, I think it's incredibly parallel.
Most definitely. And I think it's important to note that even the best of us have our own inner struggles. And I know for me personally, the fact that you've shared those sort of stories about yourself, it makes you, from my eyes at least, more approachable too, because for those that don't know, I've done work with JP personally before as well. So I know for me, even getting to the point where I was talking to you about some of my inner turmoil, it made me feel just that little bit less vulnerable and a little bit more safe to be able to share that because you were open with being human too.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I appreciate you saying that, Michelle. And actually, on that note, you remind me of something that just feels important to say right now. When I've been in relationships with women who have body image issues, which is all of them, it's just what degree is the body image issue being played out. One of the things I find most helpful for myself, but also I think the whole of the relationship, is being vulnerable with my issues, some of which I just described, because that helps me be more real. It helps me be less delusional, thinking, oh, she's got the problem. No, I can recognize her problem sometimes easier than my own because it feels safer to recognize other people's problems. but I think being open and honest with, here's my version of this issue, my version of my self-image struggles, it then gives my partner something to connect to. You know, that part of her that struggles, who has low self-worth, she can't connect to anything about me if I just play the facade of I'm strong and put together. There's nothing to plug into. But when I actually expose my tenderness, there's compatibility. There's a good fit for her low self-worth part. We can connect. And for all men out there, I think that connection, it's 100% dependent on us being willing to do it ourselves. It doesn't mean we have to do it first. Hell, we're men. We'll never want to do it first. But, you know, men, women, whatever the gender is in the relationship, I think both partners have to be willing to go there, or else the real issues will probably be continued to be reactively buried, and then the challenging, painful, frustrating, struggling symptoms of the burying will continue to be experienced.
Absolutely. I'd like to ask on a professional note, JP. I know that you've coached many women with body image, whether you want to call it problems or insecurities, and I'm sure of many varying degrees. How we've even talked about some of my personal experiences with my own body image. When it comes to coaching women through that, are there any particular key points that you can suggest to them that they could look at and start to maybe work on within themselves as a starting point?
Yes, you know, my biggest recommendation, it's more of an invitation. I don't want to impose, everybody has to do this. It's a challenge, so it has to be an invitation, is look for your unresolved shame. Shame is part of the human condition. Shame it's an emotion that kind of carries the feeling-oriented message that says, I'm not good enough. And looking for unresolved shame, not to fall into the trap of saying, oh yeah, I feel shame because of my body. I'd ask you to flip the script on that and challenge yourself to consider, I feel shame, therefore I have body image issues. A lot of us would think, no, I feel shame because of my body. No, I think we're ashamed of our body because we have shame deeper inside. And that shame, it's energy. It has to go somewhere. So unless we process it in a very healing-oriented way through our heart, that shame will typically get directed onto our perception of our body. It's like a dumping zone of it. So looking for unresolved shame, to the degree that we carry unresolved shame in our heart, that's the degree we have to create things in our outer life to be ashamed of. Sometimes, I'm ashamed of my financial situation, or I'm ashamed I can't get into a relationship, or I'm ashamed of my body. In our shame, it's a very convincing shapeshifter. It'll look at our body and it'll have all these rationalizations. This is wrong on me. This is wrong on me. And it's the truth. This is all wrong on me. They're very convincing stories that the shapeshifter of shame will tell us. So, yeah, my experience working with lots of women is there's oftentimes shame that's unprocessed from childhood. It can be an experience where we felt disconnected from or overwhelmed from a family member, father, mother, sibling, where we felt like we didn't belong, we weren't good enough for them, we weren't enough to take care of them, we weren't enough to get them to take care of us the way we wanted. And it typically is hidden shame. It's not shaming experiences that ride around at the top of our consciousness, or else we probably would have done something about it. What is in our conscious experience with body image issues is I have some degree of shame about my body. That's the shame we know about, which is, it's like the tip of the iceberg. The part of the iceberg we can see, that's just the tip. What's driving that and holding it up there is everything below the surface that we can't see. So evoking the imagination and curiosity to explore ourselves and find what we haven't found before. What is my unresolved shame? And a lot of shame, not all, but a lot of shame comes from feeling disconnected, feeling as though we're being disconnected from. So when we have someone else in our life who disconnects from us, or at least we perceive them to disconnect from us, sometimes physically, sometimes psychologically, that oftentimes is an experience that generates shame inside of us. And unless we have the emotional capacity at our young ages when we go through those experiences to know how to deal with kind of the voltage of the emotion of shame, we freeze it. And the shame stays frozen in us, and it seeks an outlet of expression. And oftentimes that outlet of expression is body image issues, all as a compensation for the unresolved shame we carry deeper in our heart.
I really agree with that, and I know from my personal journey too, that was very true and very applicable for myself. So I think that's a fantastic little tool that people can take away and start working on within themselves too.
Yeah, it's not fun to work on shame. I think it's incredibly meaningful, very rewarding, yet it's not fun. You know, it's not the emotion of happy. It doesn't create fun responses, at least not the short term.
No.
It is quite a quest to go into.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to just ask, well, open the floor up to you really. Do you have any specific thoughts or information on women's body image in general that you would like to share this morning?
One particular thought that comes to mind is when you're suffering from body image issues, I'd invite you to create, first off, a story. Like, what's your story around the body image issue? You know, what's wrong with your body? It's a delusional story. What part of your body does the story revolve around? So what part of the body and what's wrong with it? Well, how do you judge it? And then second step to this thought is decoding this literal critical story into a symbolic understanding. So you say, my legs are too fat. So you get to ask yourself, what do fat legs represent to you? What does it mean to me to have fat legs? And you might say, well, it means I'm undesirable to men, as an example. So that symbolic understanding, in my opinion, takes us more and more out of the story in our head. My legs are fat. And closer to the true feelings in our heart. Here, the truer feelings towards our heart are, I feel undesirable to men. It's not, I'm upset my legs are fat. It's, no, what I'm really upset about is I feel undesirable to men. So I think it's always important to me to find the story under the story. Body image issues are a very convincing story. That's why we need to remind ourselves once in a while, for our own benefit, it is a fictional story. And yes, the author, the part of us that authors a story, it's convinced it's a true story. It's like, no, look, my legs are fat. I can do a tape measure, and medically speaking, they are 30% bigger than the average woman's legs. So it's a fact. They're fat. But what we're always upset about is the story under the story. I feel undesirable. It's closer to the heart of the matter rather than just our head and the story in our head. Problems, personal, psychological, heartfelt problems, in my experience, are never solved in our head. We have a head and our logical analysis that's helpful, but until we can penetrate the story under our story in our heart, we're likely not going to be making too many strides of actual progress.
Yeah, and I think that's really important to point out. Thank you, JP.
You're welcome. Thanks for letting me point with my opinions.
Very cool. Do you have any final thoughts in general?
My last thought would be this. When we look at body image issues, it's a way of us, women, no, pretend like I don't have issues here for a second. Only women have issues based on my pretending in this moment. So when women have body image issues, as we've stated, it's kind of coming from a sense of I feel like something's wrong with me. But I'd also like to take that a level deeper and say when you have body image issues, it's not wrong of you to have body image issues. You know, you feel defective about your body. And here, as you're addressing body image issues, you don't have to feel defective just because you have body image issues that make you feel defective about your body. It is part of the human condition. The difference between you and other people is you're working on it. You're conscious of it. You're talking about your body image issues. So it in and of itself, it's not something you have to feel defective about, in my opinion.
Very cool. I like it. I think that's important to note too. Thank you very much for sharing all of your insights and some personal stories with us, JP.
You're very welcome, Michelle. I appreciate you inviting me to be a part of this offering that you are offering the world. It's been a great pleasure.
Thank you. And for anyone watching that would like to find out some more information about JP, there is a link included to JP's website in the intro section.
So I'd love to hear from you and your thoughts on this topic. Comment them in below. If you like what you see, make sure that you hit subscribe. I put new videos up every Monday, so stay tuned for more interviews.